Yeah, so let me just go back. So welcome everybody. I'm really excited to bring, I think, an esteemed panel to you with their experience in operationalizing AI initiatives in their respective organizations. And as Bashir said in the keynote, I mean, ML, as everyone knows, ML and hyper automation are really two of the most important and impactful technology initiatives in large, primarily non-digital enterprise or non-digital native enterprises. And really ModelOps, which is what Gartner and Forrester are calling the category of capability that generally CIOs and central technology groups are being demanded to provide to AI initiative practitioners and drivers like our panel today, is one of the most important areas of investment that as we've been seeing. Very briefly about myself, I've been very lucky to be involved in the intersection of ML and large operational accountable software. Most my career, I was technical lead for the National Center for Data Mining for 6 years, and then started a company in highly accountable enterprise software that went public in 2012. For the last 4 years, I've been driving ModelOp, our company, to help large enterprises operationalize and scale and govern AI initiatives. But importantly, for this audience, I think you will get a lot out of listening to three truly, truly capable and leadership-driven practitioners in AI initiatives in their respective organizations and throughout their careers. So I'll briefly introduce them and then turn it over to them to introduce themselves. We have Beaumont Vance, who's the head of AI, data science, and emerging technology at TD Ameritrade. Dr. Satyam Priyadarshy, who is the chief data scientist and technical fellow at Halliburton. And Nick Kabra, who's the vice president of analytics, data science, and head of machine learning at American Express. So truly an esteemed panel here to talk about their experiences. I'm going to have them each introduce themselves briefly, and then we have a series of questions which I'll kind of round robin in terms of their answers. And certainly if something comes up that's more organic, we will follow that as well. So without further ado, let me have Beaumont. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for the intro and the invite. Beaumont Vance, as mentioned, I'm the head of AI, data science, and emerging technologies at TD Ameritrade. I think the thing to note is TD Ameritrade is not TD Bank. We are actually an online, basically online stockbroker, right? We're a fintech that disrupted the industry about in the 70s to democratize trading for the masses and wealth management for the masses. And as such, we're very, very focused in the digital space. We do not have like the same issues that banks have. We're largely customer focused in terms of trading and wealth management, which includes education and access to the stock markets.
Great, thank you. Satyam?
Yeah, so I've been with the oil and gas industry for about 6 years now. I set up what is called the Big Data and Data Science Center of Excellence for the oil and gas industry. And my background is like back in AOL and network solutions and Axiom, before that academics. So I've been playing with data for almost 25 years now, large scale, and then also learned how to monetize large scale data in real time. So with that experience, I set up this oil and gas industries, something very different and a complex industry. But they have a lot of value in the data eventually.
Great. And Nick?
Sure. Thank you, Stu. So I would say when you talk about digital disruptions, I've had the good fortune to build digital data ecosystems and have led quantitative and analytics teams for ground up for machine learning, NLP, predictive analytics, and cloud strategy. I have also been a regular at Kaggle competitions and had the opportunity to learn from millennials since I teach big data and marketing analytics as adjunct faculty at Columbia University. Currently, I head machine learning in the cloud and head for data science analytics team at Amex, where my mission is to build AI services, particularly vision and image, speech, conversational chatbots, and custom deep learning models on AI platforms, using frameworks like TensorFlow, Torch, Theano on the cloud infrastructure. And in my previous roles, I have worked with banking and financial institutions. If you've heard of Agora dark pool low latency system at Credit Suisse, the Citibank multi-asset class trading and Bank of America insights for valuation recommendation engine, I have implemented those as well as worked with various insurance firms and being an advisor to multiple startups like Rulala, Fleet Advantage Analytics, EO5, Taskers, Central Square Labs, and Pivotal Hadoop Distro, which was then taken over by Hortonworks and then Cloudera. And now maybe there are talks of Cloudera being taken over. So it's a process, as you know. So I would pause there, and I would say if people are interested, the reason why I talk at these conferences is I am always looking out for great talent to mentor and join my team. So if people are looking for the right opportunities, I would say maybe the team can later on share my email and we can connect with those folks. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you, Nick. So great. So let's dive into it. We have 4 pretty meaty questions that I really encourage the audience to listen very carefully to Nick, Satyam, and Beaumont about their experience and what they look for in terms of what the CIO and Technology Center needs to provide as shared services as AI initiatives need to scale and become more accountable in their operational kind of role within a large organization. So the first question is, and just a broad question, and again, I'll just kind of randomly kind of round robin you. And I request that each of our panelists keep it to just a couple minutes so we can get through all 4 questions in the next 28 minutes or so. But the first is, what are the main challenges to include in terms of integrating AI/ML into existing programs and processes? You know, how do we govern the life cycles of these models? And it's not just necessarily ML models. This could mean natural language processing, rules-based models, other things that go into the overall AI framework. But obviously, for the large, large enterprises, there have been existing processes and programs in place that have been driving the business well before ML came onto the scene. So what are some of the challenges to integrating such a fast-moving technology like AI and ML into those processes? And maybe I'll start with you, Satyam.
Yeah, so one has to understand the fundamental, what are we trying to do in terms of what area of the business we are actually trying to integrate, right? We all know that the technology stack is very mature in many of these industries, so you can't overnight just move and shift everything, right? Whether it comes to cloud technology or whether it comes to data warehouse technology, things like that. So, and then the second part that is important is the current stack of technology. The second part is the actual talent that is needed to take this forward, right? And as Nick was mentioning that he's hiring people, so am I. Let's compete on that. but in the sense, there is a need for this talent which can actually implement these things in a different life cycle that is needed. It is the life cycle is slightly different from the traditional data life cycle that we talk about in general sense. The third part is, even if in a single business, the life cycles are very different for different phases of the business. So the governance rules, the accessibility rules, the implementation rules have to be really contextualized and customized for the phase of the life cycle we are talking about. And unlike internet companies where I used to work in the past, or media agencies, or educational industry, especially oil and gas, which is a complex industry. If you look at the higher level, midstream, downstream, and upstream, that itself, and each of these streams have multiple business lines. And these are very, very complex because they're engineering and science based. So one has to actually develop the right practice, the business area, and then how you implement it. Like, plus one simple example, something, especially an AI model, deploying in a field in a test for testing and equipment in the back office is going to be very different when you want to deploy something in an offshore platform. right? So these things have to be thought out, and good what you call frameworks have to be developed and implemented.
Great, thank you, Satyam. Nick?
Sure. So, augmenting, I perfectly agree with what Satya mentioned. I think, and since this is a model ops discussion, I think when we talk about model ops, it's the capability that focuses on DevOps or getting the models into production 24/7. And that capability means you should have the metal to deploy this model. There are various practices which various firms follow. Like one is performance requirements. Second one is separating the prediction algorithm from the model coefficients. The third one is developing automated testing for the model. And then you have back testing and stress testing and non-testing infrastructure. And then you have to do trial model running. So I think when we talk about the deployment of models and the challenges which are there in AI and ML for deployment, the deployment phase can be as simple as generating a report, or it can be as complex as implementing a totally new predictive modeling process. And this is where I think model ops can help to eliminate the model depth and bring your models right from the development phase to the production phase. So how will you deploy the ML model to production? You have to train the machine learning model first on a local system or remote system or in the cloud. Then wrap the logic into an application. Use Docker or Kubernetes to containerize this application. And then host this container on maybe an AWS, EC2 or S3 and consume the web service. So I think the key point is the enterprise AI architect or the data science team should be able to define automations as to where the models are coming from. And as the model moves through different phases or stages of this life cycle, like user acceptance, QA, etc., they should be able to move through these different data platforms and different IT services, which would make the life for the IT team easier as well as for the CI.
Yep, great, Nick. And Beaumont?
Yeah, I'll echo. I don't want to restate what Nick said, but I'm convinced that we haven't necessarily developed the true path to production and deployment in data science in many of data science disciplines. You know, that you'll find marketing has done a very good job of like propensity model production, where they've got a path to production and they've got a way to deploy them quickly and mark their models daily and test them. And some in financial services, some of the portfolio management firms do, and they'll calculate VAR and things like this daily. But very often the focus is on getting the insight and not necessarily on how are you going to get it integrated into the systems. Now that we have APIs, it's not that it's necessarily it's not a tech challenge. It ends up being, for the most part, a people challenge, because as Satyam said, like there's an existing process in place. There are people who do this job already, right? And so if you have to have a clearly defined problem that the business absolutely wants, so that they're the ones who are driving you actually delivering this. It can't just be let's have fun. And the other problem is you really have to have people who are focused on change management. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a tech problem. I mean, we can sketch this out, a solution for, right? We could all sketch out a solution today. And I'll just share a conversation I had with a data scientist the other day. He's a fairly advanced, experienced data science. He has about 10 or 15 years of experience. But we were talking about an ML platform that we have that I've been using for years that can develop. It's just for developing models, right? To explore data, find the patterns, and build a model. And it's got built-in APIs. And we've been using it for a real-time system. And he said, "Oh no, we're pulling that out because when we do it in Python, we get it's 3% more accurate." And I was like, "Well, how long does it take you to build a model?" And he said, "Oh, only 3 or 4 weeks." And I said, "Well, yeah, but our ML platform takes about 15 or 20 minutes." And he said, "Yeah, but ours is 3% faster." And I looked at him, I said, "You know the story of John Henry and the steam shovel?" I'm like, you do realize that you are John Henry and that the steam engine is going to win. And he got very upset by that. And I think that's the crux of the problem that we're facing. Is the cultural issues that we're up against in order to deploy these things. We know how to do it. We know how to integrate it, but it's the people that you have to get on board and understand what you're trying to do and have to want to do it for some reason. It has to solve a problem for everybody.
Yeah, I think that really matches our experience, what all three of you said, which is basically the complexity and challenges of post-development and post-production are as much about, if not more about, integrating into existing processes, crossing cultural divides, clearly having to be very attentive to some of the extremely technical, demanding technical challenges in terms of, this particular model might need this particular library, deployed in this particular place and has to go through all the security, but these are models that are driving accountability. So how do we get the governance, the regulatory reports, all the systems that had already been in place for kind of general go to business integrated into this kind of rapid technology stream? So definitely a set of emerging challenges which all three of you have had very concrete experience in terms of solving. So that's exciting. I think that brings up nicely the next question, which is, again, not a technical question. It's really an organizational question, which is when we talk about post-development, post-deployment life cycles and how to automate those appropriately. And automation might include just integration with workflow management and other business process management tools. So, we know that such and such model was approved and it's all, there's a lineage and traceability for that. Or repeatability in certain sets of the more technical, challenging ML models, for example. Is it better for this kind of operational post-development, post-deployment kind of capability to be federated or centralized? Who should own it? And maybe I'll start with you, Satyam.
Yeah, so as I said, in the industry that I am in, it's a mixed combination of it, right? Whether I'm talking about the back office side of it, like say equipment testing area, for example, that is at the what you call the ground level. But when we are talking about things in the field or say IoT sensors or the edge computing, then these have to be managed by what we in oil and gas we use a term called asset managers. They want to control that asset. Basically, asset means the field. So they want a full control on it because they're responsible for the production. So the thing is, you have to have the model adapted to how the company works or the industry works, and it's a mix of it. But the fundamental part is that yes, there is what I call the knowledge bank of AI models, which is like a center of excellence, which is at that corporate level, is very, very important, because then you know that you're not duplicating the effort. So for example, one kind of a mechanical pump or 10 kinds of different mechanical pumps, you don't want to re-engineer your models again and again because the two departments cannot talk to each other or whatever the silos, right? In that case, the center of excellence can play a big role in optimizing the cost to build these models and then actually distributing it in a proper governance framework and maintaining the life cycle. If one unit changes the model for whatever needs they are, that is being have a great provenance to follow up as well, right? So these are I think as Beaumont says, that there are a lot of things that have to be developed, right? Concepts of data science have been there for a long time, and the people part has to be developed in that sense, how to think, how to change, right? 3% speed of increase speed of like model prediction, 3% in what scale or what value proposition it is, right? That you might have to change a platform to get it. That doesn't make sense in a business terms. It certainly makes sense in an academic sense, but in terms of a business sense, you have to look at the return on the innovation that you're trying to do, right? So it's very, very important how people invest and these things. But it's a mixed model. It's not, in short sentence, it's a mixed model.
And Beaumont, opinions federated, centralized. I know you've gone around that block a few times, I believe.
Yeah, I've seen it a few different ways. I think that I think it's kind of a false dilemma. I think that the reason we're arguing federated versus centralized is because we've got two different parts of the business that don't understand each other. And so the business says, we know what we want exactly because we understand the business. And then we tell IT, and IT comes back and says, well, what are the requirements? And the business says, what do you mean requirements? We just told you what we want. And IT talks and talks. And then IT or data science goes away for a while. And what I hear from senior managers all the time is they're like, God, the data scientists are great, brilliant people. I mean, they're just wizards and they bring me the greatest insights, but I have no idea what to do with them. And so I think the challenge, Tom Davenport talks a lot about the need for translators, which is however you structure this, and it probably depends on, you have to push to production, you have to control production, you have to have it centralized to some degree because your IT environment, that is your company, right? Your data is your company at the end of the day. So there has firewalls which centralizes it even within a business unit, right? Even if you're in a giant company, you've got a 50,000 person business unit, they might have a centralized federated operation. The challenge, though, is, I think the thing you got to focus on fixing is, do you have somebody who, when the business comes and say, I need a house and it needs to have 6 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, the end, like go build it. You need somebody who then is working with the builders who says, okay, what is the art of the possible? What are the types of houses we can build? What is the architectural options that we have? And then goes back to the business and says, do you guys like colonial, Dutch revival, neo-modern? Like what, right? And gives them some options and zeroes in on what you're actually trying to build. And Agile helps a lot with that. If you include the business with the IT teams, it doesn't necessarily matter where you put any of them as long as they're working in tandem on the projects. But without a translator who understands both universes, I don't know how one team can get the other to understand its language and get in. I don't see how you get a build that actually matches business needs necessarily.
Yeah. Nick?
Stu, first of all, I would say that's a very smart question. You have 3 questions combined into one. So,
try to be efficient.
If I can try to address it. When we talk about deployment, governance, and monitoring AI initiatives, I think there are a lot of things which come into picture here. One is, the data management, the data collation, data ingestion, etc., because you need to have the right data set. One. The second thing is, how do you test if it's a predictive model, regressive model, time series model? So the testing will vary and the way you deploy it will also vary. When I say that means the ModelOps for that particular area will vary. And the third one is how do you monitor this initiative? So, other than data management, training the machine learning model and then looking at, how your organization is, and every organization is different. Who rests control over that, who can make things work or who can make or channelize things in a particular direction is very important when you try to deploy these models and get the right performance or output out of it. So that's the first thing. The second thing which I would mention about federated or centralized one, and I think I would say, Beaumont, you mentioned a very good point over there. I think the models need to be federated, but there has to be a centralized control. And that really helps. The reason is when you have centralized machine learning, you have identification of the problem, data preparation, training the ML model, sending that model to the client, and then, result prediction, etc. But there are various limitations as regards to, you can say, GDPR, HIPAA, or some other protection regulations which are there. So in that scenario, I think a federated model, which has been, even Google came out with TensorFlow federated, and then OpenMind started a big work in the federated area. I think it's important to have a federated model, but with a centralized ownership, so that someone is in full control. And who should own it? I think currently what is happening is there are CDOs, and then there are CIOs, and then there is a CDO and CDAO combined structure for various organizations. I think the true value from machine learning model or data management can be derived when we go to web or CDO 3.0 level, which means this is being discussed at the board level, not just at the CIO level or the chief data officer or the chief analytics officer. And that person is the one who should be presenting to the board. The board understands this, and then they make a collective decision. I think that will be true value for deploying these models and getting the most, whether it's predictive, prescriptive, descriptive, or any other form.
Yeah, that's great. And I would say this is one of the reasons I was so excited to have the three of you talk to this audience, because the idea, obviously each model has to be developed in the context of a particular business problem and a particular set of data. We see a lot of small data models that are very impactful, for example. Not all models are big data models by a long shot. Even hyper modern ML style models that are really small data models. But each of those models, as Beaumont said, requires very specific requirements, both on the business side and the technical side. But to provide kind of some sort of central governance or oversight of these models that are really, it creates a challenge, because unlike traditional software, there isn't the same regularity of pattern in traditional software. Each model might need a very specific data set in production, which might be very different even where it lives when it's, EDA and data scientists are developing the models. The in production model that's really feeding it for production scoring and inference might be in a completely different place. You might have a very different regulation or regulatory structure in terms of governance for a particular model. So the challenges of providing centralized oversight for such a complex kind of federated, by definition, activity is, I think, something that this audience will continue to face. So I think it's really meaningful to hear that they're not crazy when the business, as you pointed out, Nick, starts to drive from the top down, the board level down, because of the significant investment that the board level attention is being put on for AI initiatives, over the next 5 to 10 years. So that's exciting. So I think that's a nice segue into, both if you're a CIO trying to provide a shared service or some sort of centralized, governance, while allowing for the federated reality of models, but centralized governance or patterns for any of these models, and you're trying to drive that in conjunction with your business partners, the line of businesses who have the data scientists and are driving the actual investment in modeling. What are the meaningful KPIs that would be required to track the success of these types of initiatives, given both their complexity and their impact on risk and top line potential going forward? And maybe I'll start with Beaumont, start with you on this question.
Yeah, I'm going to purposefully ignore any questions having to do with risk management, since I did that for 20 years and I moved on with my life. I have enough uncertainty without diving back into more. Yeah, one of the things, you have to have a discipline around it, and there's two ways to measure it. You should have really, really clear benefits before you start off on anything that you're building, so that you have something to measure against in the future, right? Number one. Ones that are financial or efficiency based are fairly easy, because you can actually measure them, and we use APT for uplift analysis. So if we're trying to do something like have a better real-time digital model that will help decrease attrition, we can run a uplift model on pre-post and create synthetic test controls and see whether or not we move the needle in what we were trying to do digitally, right? Because there's thousands of variables out there, but we can measure it that way. Not everything falls into that bucket, though. Some of it is customer satisfaction, which may or may not be measured. You may not be able to measure it that well. Some of it might be, ease of use of the site, or stickiness of a site, or any number of soft things internally, especially back office stuff. And with those, what I've tried to do is, you have to instill a discipline that there is a process before you stand anything up, that you are planning it, you are defining what the problem is you're solving, you're defining what the benefits are going to be, and they have to be something that you can tangibly see coming out the other side. And even if it's something like our surveys are going to be more positive and something soft like that, that should be predefined. Because my rule is, before you start playing a game, I don't care what it is, football, baseball, soccer, whatever, right? You agree on what the rules are before you start playing. Because afterwards, people have a tendency to sort of adapt everything to fit their particular view on the world. And so if you go off with it, you're like, we're just going to build something great and everybody's going to love it and there'll be nirvana. And then it happens and nobody can agree now on whether you had any benefit, because you didn't say what problem you're solving and you didn't say what good looked like. So start with what good looks like, and then I think the rest follows. But the main thing is you have to be driving that discipline. As a CIO, you'd have to drive the discipline across your organization where people are expected to do that as part of their goals and as part of the project management cycle. That those are steps that are in there, and you will expect to see on every project the post-mortem with some type of measurement of benefit and something you can go back and remeasure later on if you need to. That's
great. Nick?
Sure. So I would put it this way. For any enterprise initiative to be successful, you need to have certain KPIs defined. And there are, I work for a credit card company, so I would say when we look at KPIs, we look at what is our customer retention or churn rate. Improved profit margins are sure to follow if we focus on our customer retention rate and loyalty. The second is quality index. That means what's the consensus of a particular product or service. Just because one item is selling like hotcakes does not mean the campaign is a huge success. In fact, what if the product was poorly received by consumers? So quality index is another factor. The third one is click-through to conversion rate ratios. How many people are logging onto your website and how much is the conversion rate? That defined in these times, what is the click-through actually converting to sales? The fourth one is traffic source, I would say. Where is the actual traffic coming from? Whether it's Ameritrade, TD, or anyone. How much is coming from organic traffic via Google keyword, Google search, or how much is coming from paid ads? The fifth one is social media response. I mean, you can have number of likes and shares from Facebook, from Instagram, YouTube videos, thumbs up, thumbs down, responses or discussion in LinkedIn group or a social media context. You have to figure out what kind of personalization and segmentation you can do to hold on to those customers. And I think these factors, when you consider them collectively, will make sure that your KPIs are actually successful and deliver value to any organization.
Great, Nick. Satyam?
Yeah, both Nick and Beaumont actually talked about websites and metrics related to them. It just took me back about 10 years back into my other world where I used to do all these things for living and teach a course at Georgetown on digital marketing analytics. So it's still a very relevant topic. But let's talk about in oil and gas industry or any energy sector for that matter. There are only two major metrics. What is the cost? If we were to look at how, can I reduce the cost to produce oil, right? Or if you are a service company, then you're looking at the revenue growth or the profit margin, right? But but come down one level below that. It's all about any exercise that you do in a deployment of an AI model. It has to have a financial value to it. I use the word economic value or the economic impact, and that could be measured easily in terms of either the revenue growth or the reduction in the cost or NPV over the 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, because it's a return on innovation in some sense. And then, of course, the efficiency part is always there. And so if these are every project that we do can be easily put into one of these KPI metrics. And as Beaumont said, that yes, you have to know what you want to kind of achieve. You may not get the same number, but you have an idea, because as an industry, you already have a tacit knowledge of what my inefficiency is already there. So if you want to reduce that inefficiency by a certain percent, and that will actually give you that value that you are looking for in economic terms by leveraging the models, right? And that is, so it's a very clear path line. It's not a fuzzy buzzword or anything, but people need to really follow this.
Great. All right, we're coming up to the time, so this is our last question. So just for the time crunch, the question is how best to adopt governance while including AI and MLOps in existing process initiatives. We've covered some of that, so I'd really like just in a minute or two for each of you, and I'll say just Nick, Satyam, and Beaumont. I won't just go maybe a minute or two. What's one message or two messages that the CIOs and the technology leaders that are on this, listening to this panel should think about in terms of AI initiatives, scaling, and governance? Nick?
I think audits are the way forward for AI governance. whether it's cybersecurity risk, high-profile AI failures will reduce consumer trust and only serve to increase future regulatory burdens. And these can be best avoided by taking proactive measures today. So the auditors of machine learning model need to have a hacker's mentality to identify the different ways in which a model could fail. And I would say evolving AI solutions can make auditability and traceability challenging, and the speed at which they evolve can result in errors manifesting on a large scale in a very short space of time. But without audit, you cannot understand the regulatory behavior, whether it's NLP, whether it's any other machine learning platform which you use, or text analytics, sentiment analysis. I think audit is important. That's it.
Satyam?
So I agree with Nick on what he said about the AI and cybersecurity complexity that is growing. But more importantly, I think one has to realize that most of the industry has been sitting on these things for a long time, and now they want very fast results out of AI, right? They can't even connect their data at the speed they want the results actually. So I think one of the best thing to do is learn. There is a systematic method to building the model, taking to the operations, and as a result, you build your best practices into that governance framework. That is the only success metric. The cybersecurity component remains valid, the provenance remains valid, but it has to be done in a systematic manner, not to rush things.
Great. Beaumont?
Yeah, and I would say that just different angle on what Satyam just said. Path to production is everything. You need real functioning tools that improve the business, and that is just simply not. My message would be that it is not going to happen unless there is the appropriate amount of energy, money, time, and authority put into these things. And what I see happening very frequently is people want this. They know that it is competitive advantage. They know that the companies that get this right 5 years from now are going to own the space. This is why startups can take over really big companies, right? If you're a big company and you're up against an innovator's dilemma type situation, which you are if you're a big company and you're a successful company, you are not going to see the change by just talking about it. No amount of press interviews or conference appearances is going to change anything. It requires true change management. So if you need to change the organization. You need to focus on change management, put your real energy behind that, and build the systems that Satyam is talking about. Otherwise, you're not going to see any benefit from this, but your competitors will. Great.
Nick, Satyam, Beaumont, thank you so much on behalf of the whole audience for sharing your tremendous experience in this ModelOps area. I'm sure it was extremely valuable, and I hope we get to hear from more of you too in other events. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Beaumont.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having us.